There is probably no place on the face of our planet that is hotter or more humid than the jungle of Papua New Guinea. To this day, the second largest island on Earth remains the least explored region of our planet. In the mountains, it rains practically every day. During the day, the temperature can climb as high as 40 degrees Celsius, and at night drops to 18-20 degrees. Because of the constant rainfall in the mountains, there are a great many waterfalls on Papua New Guinea, which makes the uneasy task of reaching the island's heartland even more challenging. On the island of New Guinea, the tropical rainforests have remained unchanged for millions of years. Here, it is still possible to discover an unknown valley and meet its Stone Age inhabitants who have never encountered a white person. Their only weapons are hatchets made of stone, spears, and bows and arrows. They worship their own gods, but when night falls, they fear evil spirits that come with the darkness. Here, mankind's past still exists unchanged, with its blood rituals and sacrificial ceremonies. They were waiting for me by their campfire in a prearranged place, and I could tell that they were excited, although they tried not to show it, for it is against their custom to openly demonstrate their emotions. My old friends invited me to share their dinner. I had first set foot in the province of Jaya Vijaya, which is located in the western part of New Guinea, in the territory of Irian Jaya, more than 5 years before. After my first visit, I returned every year to meet with the Papuan natives. They were untouched by civilization and lived in their mountain-enclosed world exactly as many thousands of years ago their ancestors had. The aim of my 5th expedition to this region was to gather a collection at the request of the Russian Academy of Sciences, but my personal priority was to get as much video material as possible, for with the advance of civilization into these territories, the ancient traditions and customs of the Aborigines were rapidly disappearing. In the 8th century, long before the Europeans knew about the existence of New Guinea, the lords of Sumatra Empire Srivijaya were hunting for slaves here. Today, you can still see images of curly-haired people on the bas-reliefs of the temple of Borobudur on the island of Java. In 1545, Captain Indigo Ortiz de Retes, on his voyage from the Molucca Islands to Mexico, passed north of this territory and called it New Guinea. Perhaps the natives he saw on the island's beaches reminded him of the Africans of Guinea. Translated from the Malayan language, Orang Papua means a person with short curly hair. Evidently, this knowledge prompted Jorge de Menezes, the Portuguese governor of the Molucca Islands, to name New Guinea the island of Ilhas dos Papuas, which means Islands of the Papua. To this day, the inhabitants of New Guinea bear the name of Papua. The exploration of New Guinea was hindered by its unfavorable geographic conditions. The island's shores are covered by mosquito-infested swamps, while other regions are effectively barricaded by tall mountains covered with impassable jungle. The European expeditions into the heart of the island for a long period of time were discouraged by encounters with hostile natives. Even today, there remain many tribes with which contact has not yet been established. The first scientific expedition, organized by Harvard University, visited the central region of the New Guinea Highlands in 1961. With great difficulty, it managed to reach the Baliam Valley. One of the members of this expedition, Michael Clark Rockefeller, disappeared without a trace under mysterious circumstances in this region. He was considered an experienced explorer of the most difficult-to-reach regions of New Guinea. The search for Rockefeller went on for 8 days, with the participation of rescue planes, patrol boats, motorboats belonging to local missionaries, and Aborigine canoes. Many of the local inhabitants believe that Rockefeller became the victim of local headhunters. In 1966, the American and Australian missionaries Stan Doyle and Phil Masters tried to establish contact with local tribes and to get the concept of brotherly love across to people who were, for all intents and purposes, still living in the Stone Age. At first, the natives believed that the two strangers were the incarnations of their dead ancestors, whose skin had turned white while traveling in the land of the dead. But after the members of the tribe discovered that the missionaries were mere mortals, their fate was sealed. They were killed and eaten by the cannibals. A great number of missionaries also died in these regions of various tropical diseases before the local inhabitants accepted Christianity. A person who finds himself in the jungle for the first time and does not possess any knowledge about the flora and fauna and how to behave oneself in these conditions is perhaps more than anything else overcome with uncertainty. The surrounding wall of dense vegetation almost always brings about acute claustrophobia. Traveling through the jungle is extremely challenging. Overcoming barriers of dense foliage, fallen trees, protruding roots and vines demands great physical effort and makes traveling along a straight course impossible. One must constantly make detours. The crowns of the trees are so dense that the sun's rays cannot evaporate the all-encompassing humidity at ground level. Only about 10% of the sunlight reaches the jungle floor. This is the reason that the state of twilight is constant in the Papua rainforest. Because of the high humidity, sweat does not evaporate from the skin's surface. It simply streams down, drenching clothes and getting into one's eyes. To us, thorns, broken branches, and the saw-like edges of the leaves of the pandanus palms represented a constant danger, for even the smallest cuts and bruises instantly became infected and refused to heal. Evening was approaching. After a long and arduous journey, we finally reached the valley. We had to find a place to set up camp, for in the tropics, night descends swiftly. We had to find a location that was as dry as possible, but also some distance away from the ponds and lakes that were numerous and a wonderful breeding ground for mosquitoes and a mass of other blood-sucking insects. With the coming of darkness, the mosquitoes become very active, appearing from swamps and mangrove thickets. They descend in great numbers on any warm-blooded creature. Finally, we found a suitable place to set up camp. I was amazed at how quickly my guides learned to pitch a tent. Their movements were accurate and precise, although I knew that they had never done this before. We made a campfire, and my native companions started preparing one of their favorite dishes, baked bananas. During the meal, they reminisced about my previous expeditions, and I could tell that they were genuinely happy to see me again. The sun passed below the horizon, and our surroundings turned pitch black. Morning arrived. Today, we had a difficult passage through the jungle before us. The guides suggested that the easiest way to reach our goal was to travel down the river. Actually, traveling by raft is the easiest and most comfortable way of traveling down tropical rivers. The material for building the rafts were banana trees we found growing nearby. 3 banana trunks were sufficient to be able to support a grown man in the water. Traveling down tropical rivers is always full of surprises, encounters with floating logs or large animals or reptiles. This is why it is vital to devote your undivided attention to the water's surface. The first mishap occurred at the very start of my voyage. This particular form of transportation was so alien to me that at one of the first sharp bends of the river, I lost my balance on the wet banana raft and disturbed a crocodile that was peacefully resting in the shallows. It should be mentioned that New Guinea is the home of the largest crocodiles on Earth, the Papuan crocodile. Not wanting to go through any unnecessary risks, I abandoned my raft and, with the help of a hanging vine, managed to climb the slippery and muddy riverbank. At last, the solid wall of jungle parted, and we saw a wide green valley before us. In the valley stood a village of round huts surrounded by a fence. Nearby rose a 60-foot-high watchtower made of vines and branches. On top of it stood a native warrior who was sending us signals. The village already knew of our arrival. According to the customs of the Dani Dugum tribe, I had to be the first to approach the chief and greet him, and then I was to meet the other members of the tribe. In Europe, where the mass media are acquiring more and more power over the common man, the knowledge of psychology loses its primary importance. We have less and less time to get to know each other. We communicate through computers, newspapers, and television. New Guinea is one of the remaining corners of the planet where the knowledge of local traditions and customs might mean the difference between life and death. If I had not been able to establish contact with these people, my remaining among them would have been impossible. Knowledge and experience of communicating with Aborigines was something I had acquired in the process of my expeditions to various hard-to-reach regions of the world over a long period of time. I had often heard how hostile this tribe was. Yet I am certain that if you approach them as a friend, let them understand that you love them and do not wish them any harm, just the opposite. Show them that you come bearing gifts, respecting their traditions and wanting to help. Then, the danger of living among them is not that great. One of the boys, who had never seen a white man before, was very frightened by my arrival in the village. Frankly, my expeditions are connected with a certain degree of risk. But to be perfectly honest, this is exactly what makes them interesting and fills my life with content and purpose. In honor of my arrival, the natives organized a wild boar hunt. The hunters quickly picked up the trail, and during the following half hour tried to get the animal to a certain spot where the chief of the tribe was waiting. The Dani tribe hunts wild boars according to certain traditional rules. The animal must be killed by the chief by an arrow to the heart and from close range. If this for some reason does not happen, it is considered a bad sign. At this time, all the rules were observed. The arrow or the sharp bamboo arrowhead pierced the victim's heart. The hunter retrieves the arrow and stops the flow of blood, for it is considered a protein-rich food supplement. The animal's front and hind feet are tightly bound with vines, and a specially prepared stick is used to carry the boar. Carrying their heavy burden, the hunters proudly return to their village. The whole tribe gathers around the prey, discussing the successful hunting expedition. The preparation ceremony begins. The tribe's chief, using a special bamboo knife called vim, cuts out the boar's tail and its ears. Afterwards, they are taken to the men's house, and eventually they will be used in ritual ceremonies. The natives start a fire, using a method that has not changed over the course of tens of thousands of years. Using a rope made from the rotang palm, the natives rub a dry piece of wood that lies on a bed of straw. When the straw catches fire, they light a torch, and then use that torch to light the campfire itself. The boar is placed on top of the open fire. Meanwhile, the members of the tribe place small and large stones on another fire nearby. Then, using sticks, the natives scrape the burnt hair off the boar's carcass. One of the men begins preparing an earth oven. Villagers bring banana leaves, on top of which they will cut the boar into sections. This task is reserved for the older, experienced warriors. Youngsters are not allowed to take part in this important ritual. With razor-sharp knives, they make 2 deep incisions in the boar's belly and carefully remove its inner organs. They will be cooked separately. This food is intended for the women of the tribe. The carcass is divided into 3 parts, and thin strips of meat are cut off. The women line the oven with grasses that will give the meat a special aroma and flavor. Then, white-hot stones are placed in the oven. Because many stones are needed and they lose heat rapidly, the whole village takes part in this task. After this is done, pieces of meat along with sweet potatoes are placed in the oven, then more hot stones, and finally the boar's hide is placed on top. All this is carefully covered with grass and banana leaves. Then water is poured over the oven to create steam. The meat is cooked for approximately 1 hour. The boar's hide is given to the boys, to future warriors. The women received the vegetables and the plants. The natives eat according to their tribal rank. As a rule, the best pieces of meat go to the oldest and most experienced warriors, while the younger ones get what remains. The tribe's witch doctor is also remembered. Because of his poor eyesight, he rarely leaves the men's house. He receives several choice pieces of meat. As an honored guest, I was invited to share in the feast and was given quite a large piece. I shared my portion with one of my guides, a young warrior, for I knew that many of the younger members of the tribe were almost always hungry. The feast was reaching its conclusion. In the mountain regions, the weather changes are swift and dramatic, and now suddenly a storm was approaching. The old witch doctor, Mayuk Mabel, came out of the men's house. He stood next to the sacred tree and began chanting an ancient magic spell. Rain, go away. I am afraid of you. Please go to another place. Amazingly, the thunderstorm stopped just as suddenly as it had begun.